think we will start slowly. On behalf of our entire board, I would like to welcome you to our June program. Before I introduce our speaker, who many of you know, I'm making the introduction for our president, Jim Hammond, who's recovering well from surgery. He couldn't be here tonight. And of course, we have a number of people joining us on Zoom. Are you hearing? Wait, raise your hand if you can't hear me. I'm not speaking into this. Okay. I'm Tony Davina, the email coordinator of the board, also a researcher and frequent contributor to our newsletter, and also president of Friends of Neil Loghouse. Let me recognize the board, other board members who are here. Of course, there's our speaker, Helen Wilson, our vice president. The other members, I saw Todd Wilson, our social media coordinator. Audrey Glickman will be back there on the camera. She is our board secretary and media specialist. And the only other board member we have in attendance tonight is our treasurer, Rod Parmigiani, sitting over there at the table. Okay, the other board members. We had Alex Musicant come here earlier and do the technical setup as he does. He's our second vice president. I'm also filling in for our program coordinator, Todd Miller, who works with Toby Chapman. He could not be here tonight. Charles Suckup, our city archivist. Evelyn Young, our treasurer emeritus. And Stanley Klein, our membership coordinator. Going back to our guest speaker, those of you who are members certainly know Helen Wilson. You've read many of her articles, hundreds of articles that she's written for the newsletter that she edits, and our Squirrel Hill books that she has edited and written for. If you're not a member of the Historical Society, all you have to do is Google Helen Wilson Squirrel Hill, and it all comes to you. Tonight, these are notes that Todd prepared for me. Helen's going to speak on Squirrel Hill's 4th of July celebrations through the years. Her talk explores the neighborhood's elaborate 4th of July festivities, many of which were held in Schenley Park during the late 19th and 20th centuries. Through photographs, newspaper accounts, and historical research, Helen will bring to life a tradition that has helped shape Squirrel Hill's sense of community and civic pride. Right. One last word I will say. When we do concluding remarks, I will remind you about our next coming program, but there's one very special thing that I want to talk about, which is the registration that will be going on for the July 13th field trip for members, the Henry Kerner exhibit at the Lost Building at Rivers of Steel in Homestead. And I'll talk a little more about that, but we're going to be doing online registration starting tomorrow and this week, and I think once we do that, the openings that we have, because it will be limited, will start to fill off. So please remember to look into that before you leave. Helen, please come up.
Our technical expert isn't here right now. He did set up for us, that's Alex, so I hope everything seems to be going well. Okay, so anyway, 4th of July celebrations in Squirrel Hill. When I was researching this, I found other patriotic events that were interesting as well. So I have included them in this presentation. 2026 is the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And Independence Day has been celebrated ever since then. However, the ways the 4th was celebrated varied. And here is, in 1977, the theme of Pittsburgh's 4th of July celebration was, out of this world, July 4th. Now, is this sound okay? Is it too loud? Is it okay?
That's good, that's good.
Good? Okay. So before I begin the presentation proper, here is Squirrel Hill, according to the boundary lines that were drawn by Pittsburgh in the 1980s. And you can see that Schenley Park is mostly in Squirrel Hill, except for Schenley Plaza and the area around it. So when I talk about Squirrel Hill celebrations, I'm talking about the ones in Schenley Park as well. To begin, even before the Revolutionary War was over, people were starting to celebrate the 4th of July. 1777 in Rhode Island, 13 gunshots were fired in salute, morning and evening. 1777 in Philadelphia, an official dinner for the Continental Congress was held with toasts, a 13-gun salute, speeches, prayers, parades, troop reviews, and fireworks. 1778, at his New Jersey Army headquarters, General Washington gave his troops a double ration of rum and an artillery salute. 1781 in Massachusetts, the General Court was the first state legislature to recognize July 4th, as a state celebration. 1783, that's the last year of the Revolutionary War. In Salem, North Carolina, the first documented public July 4th event was held, which was a musical program. Local celebrations in the early 1800s were both militaristic and social. 1801, groups of men met at taverns around town to celebrate, including at Negley's Old Tavern, not far from Fort Fayette. And that's a schematic of Fort Fayette. It was located, it replaced the decaying Fort Pitt in 1792, and it was located around Penn Avenue and 9th Street, sort of around where Arts Landing is now, in that area. Before it was the staging ground for Meriwether Lewis, for the Lewis and Clark expedition in 1803. I do want to read this. A number of strangers were invited by the managers and joined the company, and it was with pleasure we recognized several who had been the companions of Washington in the most perilous times of our Revolution. Lieutenant Swearingen, Commandant of Fort Fayette, politely supplied a piece of artillery and was himself one of the party. And that was in 1807, and more than 100 men attended a dinner in an inn on the bank of the Allegheny River near Fort Fayette, followed by patriotic toasts and a discharge of artillery. And 1818, 2 militia units met at Grants Hill downtown to celebrate with a 20-gun salute, elegant entertainment, and toasts. So what were they toasting? 17 toasts were listed in this 1807 Pittsburgh Weekly Gazette article about the 4th of July. Here are some of them. The day we celebrate and all who respect it. The Constitution of the United States, the bond of our nation, of our union, the shield of our defense, and the source of our prosperity. the President of the United States, who was Thomas Jefferson at the time, the Governor of Pennsylvania, Thomas McKean, the memory of General Washington, the Army of the United States, formed for a protection, may it never be made a terror to the citizen. The judiciary, the violators of its independent merit the execration of all good men. Our rights, what heaven has bestowed, let no man take away. The girls of our town, the fairest among women, the agriculturalist, the merchant, and the mechanic. So, if that last one seems a little different than the others, it's because that in the first half of the 1800s, social and cultural changes were changing holiday celebrations. In 1801 in Greensburg, a group of women excluded from the men's celebration met separately to observe the 4th. In 1823, a celebration at a cotton factory in Pittsburgh exhibited the singular spectacle of some of the city's most distinguished and respectable gentlemen observing the day with the superintendents and hands, both male and female. By the 1830s, observances sponsored by artisans and mechanics emphasized the value of their occupations to the nation's freedom. College students got into the act. They sponsored their own 4th of July celebrations to prove their civic maturity and the importance of education to the public. Mid-1800s, the infusion of religion into 4th of July celebrations increased the tension over the proper manner in which to celebrate the holiday. In the 1840s in Washington County, Sunday school members and many citizens prayed at the Presbyterian Church before going to a grove for refreshments. Declaration of Independence was read, and then they returned to the church for more prayer, music, and a membership drive by the local temperance organization. Although the religious celebrations diffused the partisan celebrations, they promoted fragmentation along ethnic and cultural as well as religious lines. And this illustration is from the book Right Here in Squirrel Hill by Hodge McIlvaine Eagleson. And that's the book that I was going to introduce our CMU intern who's going to be researching and annotating this book this summer. But unfortunately he's sick, so next time. But anyway, this is an illustration from the book. Mid-1800s, social changes caused more fragmentation. Abolitionists saw the celebration of freedom and liberty on the 4th as hypocrisy when slavery was tolerated, so they chose the holiday for their meetings. Temperance societies sponsored their own events, comparing freedom from drunkenness to the political independence marked by the 4th. You can tell by that photo. Here's a woman abolitionist and temperance advocate from Squirrel Hill. The Murdoch family ran the firm of John R. and A. for Alexander Murdoch, who was a Civil War veteran, famous for high-quality plants and seeds. You've heard of Murdoch Farms, that area of Squirrel Hill? That's where the Murdoch's nursery was. The family was rabidly anti-slavery and fiercely patriotic. Their farmhouse near the corner of Darlington and Murdoch Roads is reputed to have been a stop on the Underground Railroad. When the Civil War began, Ellen Murdoch Watson enlisted with a committee that provided aid for Union soldiers passing through the city. And then she was sent to the front as a nurse, and she was in charge of sending soldiers back to West Penn Hospital during the war. After the war, she worked diligently for temperance because she had seen firsthand the devastating effects of alcohol on both drinkers and their families. So the Smoky City. At the turn of the 20th century, Pittsburgh was the 8th largest city in the United States and accounted for nearly half of the nation's steel output. Although the city was rolling in wealth, it was smoky, dirty, and polluted. So in the 1890s, the City Beautiful movement began. And city planners felt it was time to remake the city to resemble the grand cities of Europe, with wide boulevards, imposing buildings, and landscaped parks as part of the City Beautiful movement. Oakland was reshaped into the city's civic center, and Schenley Park was part of it. Schenley Park opened in 1889 as an element of the Oakland Civic Center. A June 1890 article in the Pittsburgh Press says the new park offered both broad, level driveways and cool, refreshing nooks. A couple of hundred men had been working there for a month or more, laying out drives, cutting the grass, digging up the underbrush, and cleaning things up, generally. Today, you can drive from one end of the park to the other. Or, if you don't care for magnificent views, you can climb down over the rocks into the dark recesses of Panther Hollow. I love these old newspapers. They have such flowery prose. Huge public events began to be held in the park only a few years after the park opened. Here's a grand 4th of July celebration, Schenley Park, 1896. A carload of horses and ponies that will take part in the racing events arrived last night. Manager Frank Dietz of the Payne Pyrotechnic Company is getting Flagstaff Hill in readiness for the Battle of Bunker Hill. And I have to read this part to you. The grand climax of the finale of the pyrotechnic display will consist of a mid-air piece, our starry banner. The piece will be 400 feet long and will be taken into the air several thousand feet before it is touched off. Patsy Traynor will haul the unlighted flag into the air attached to his largest balloon. When he has reached about 2,000 feet, he will disconnect the flag. Two parachutes at either end will cause a slow descent, and when the flag unfurls, the piece will roll out and light Old Glory in a blaze that will then be seen until it reaches the ground, or for about 5 minutes. And finally, last sentence, firearms will not be tolerated at any place in the city on Saturday. So I kept wondering, how do all these people get to the park in 1896? Well, before automobiles, people could travel to the park by train, electric trolley, carriage, bicycle, horseback, or walking. This parade happened in December 1898, but it describes a parade celebrating the opening of Beechwood Boulevard. The route was from the Schenley Hotel in Oakland, through Schenley Park, across the Beechwood Boulevard, Greenfield Bridge, and then along Beechwood to 5th Avenue. And this is in December. The article says probably over 1,000 horsemen and horsewomen, men and women in carriages, traps, dog carts, coaches, and bicycle riders will be in line. Notice trolleys. That changed everything. In the late 1880s, a major development took place in transportation, and that was the coming of the electric trolleys. People were no longer limited by distance to travel around the city. During the 1880s, as many as 190 small companies had formed. By 1901, there were 400 miles of track and 1,124 cars. And this caption on this photo says, "The trolley car has just left the land that will soon be that of Carnegie Institute of Technology. It's traveling to Oakland from Squirrel Hill." An innovation in 1893, the electric streetcar had by this time become the subject of an investment mania, with hundreds of local companies existing, at least on paper. So look at this picture. This is Junction Hollow. You can see the train tracks. See if this, no, it's not gonna work. So, but you see the train tracks cutting through the middle. You see the trolley. That trolley line, that doesn't exist anymore. It used to come up through the park. In the background, that bridge is the old Forbes Avenue Bridge. This picture was taken from the Schenley Bridge. Here's a different angle. Trolleys came to Squirrel Hill in 1893. Railroads did not permit trolleys to cross their tracks, so the first trolleys came to Squirrel Hill on a trestle from John Kerr Street in Oakland that went above the tracks. The trestle is the lower one of the bridges there. The trestle didn't last long because a stronger Forbes Avenue Bridge was built in 1898 that could bear the weight of the trolleys, so the route was moved to Forbes Avenue. But meanwhile, you can see the trolley route is it's the first of the road cuts, and the train tracks are down below. And you can see some rudimentary trails going up to Schenley Park, and down below is Boundary Street. In 1897, only a year later, almost all Pittsburgh public school students went to a picnic in Schenley Park. Gaily decorated trolley cars for older pupils and wagons for the primary students were lined up in convenient places. And by 1930, I'm sorry, got a little confused there. 1930, a vast army of several thousand children was on its way to the park. And this day included a balloon ascension, circus performance, and athletic games. I couldn't find a picture of it, but I did find this generic photo of a school wagon to give you an idea of how the children would have been transported. A grand parade was held in Schenley Park in 1904. This picture shows St. Pierre's Ravine. That was filled in between 1911 and 1915, and the 1898 Belfield Bridge, buried when the ravine was filled in. It now supports the Mary Schenley Fountain, Song to Nature. This photo shows a parade wending its way into Schenley Park. And before we look at the parade and learn a little more about it, here's what Schenley Plaza looked like in 1936 and then today. So the plaza was completely filled in, and I think of that when I go to Schenley Plaza, and I think they filled that whole thing in the early 1900s. It's mind-boggling. And then you can see that the original Schenley Plaza design was much more, there you can tell it's more automobile-friendly, car-friendly, carriage-friendly. 1936, it would have been cars. Back to the parade. The parade was for the dedication of the Colonel Alexander Leroy Hawkins Memorial at the far end of the Panther Hollow Bridge. Newspaper reports said 20,000 people attended, including 5,000 soldiers. Colonel Alexander Leroy Hawkins was an officer in the Spanish-American War, beloved by his troops. He was wounded in battle, contracted malaria, and died on his way home. So the parade was for the dedication of this memorial. And it's at the bottom of the ramp at the Panther Hollow Bridge, so very few people get to see it because they're looking at the traffic. 4th of July in Schenley Park in 1906. This is the schedule for the 1906 4th of July celebration, which was attended by thousands of people. Events took place in 4 widely spaced locations in the park. You recognize them? Let's see, at the bandstand, racetrack, Snyder's Grove, Flagpole Hill. There's the bandstand. It offered musical entertainment to crowds in the early years of the park. It was located where the Anderson Playground is now, also called Dinosaur Playground, adjacent to the Charles Anderson Memorial Bridge on Panther Hollow Road. The racetrack, Schenley Oval, featured horse racing, harness racing, beginning in 1893. Grandstand was added in 1907 and stables in 1911. Grandstand burned down in 1914, but races took place until the late 1920s. The Schenley Oval Sportsplex is there now. Flagpole Hill, it's now Flagstaff Hill, and it was called that sometimes even back then. But look at that flagpole. That's really a big flagpole. So the picture was taken in 1914, and of course the flagpole's gone. Snyder's Grove. On the right is one of the pages from that program. Snyder's Grove was located around where the Neil Log House now stands, and it stood when Snyder lived there, of course. Before Schenley Park opened in 1889, Mary Schenley rented the land to tenant farmers, and Adam Schneider, or Schneider, spellings varied, was the last tenant farmer on the property, and he had to leave when his lease was terminated. And this is a sketch of the old Schneider homestead. And he didn't live in the log cabin. He probably used it either as a stable or as a storage place. He had a farmhouse that was torn down when the park was put in place. And that's what's there now. Aftermath of the 1906 celebration. Sorry about that. A surplus of 2,400, let me go back there, okay, was left over after the celebration. There was discussion, how do you spend it? Should it be used for the Milk and Ice Fund for children? Or select councilman Stevenson decided to use it for the Catacausen Fountain, put in that part of the park where it would be most used. And it was a fountain, and there it is today. And we think that might have been where the spring house was for the Snyder homestead. We're not sure, but it's down at the base of the steps that go up to the Neil Log House. This is the schedule for the 1910 4th of July events at Schenley Park. You have athletic events at Schenley Oval, a concert at the bandstand, horse racing at the Oval, water sports in Panther Hollow Lake, the reading of bulletins from the Jeffries Johnson fight at the bandstand. That was important. Then fireworks displays, besides the open-air vaudeville at Snyder's Grove. Notice fireworks. From the beginning, fireworks were part of the 4th of July. And so were dire warnings about their dangers. This is excerpt from 2 ways of celebrating. The boys were having the time of their lives. Pop, pop, flish, flash went the firecrackers, and bing, bang, bong went the big cannon crackers, the pistols, rifles, and guns. What if they did go home with some scratches, burns, and missing fingers? On another street was a crowd of girls dressed in white, running up a flag in one of their front yards and singing the Star-Spangled Banner, America, and Columbia, the gem of the ocean. At night, several of the boys were at home in bed or in the hospital, being treated for burns and shattered fingers, while the girls were all out enjoying the fireworks and eating ice cream at the soda fountain. So that's 1913. Pittsburgh celebrated its sesquicentennial in 1908. Thousands of people attended parades, church bell ringing, tours, and other events downtown and in Oakland. Boat parades took place on the rivers. Races and musical performances were held at Schenley Oval. It's just unbelievable how it looks like one of the Super Bowl parade when the Steelers won the Super Bowl. Look at that crowd. And the sesquicentennial included an air show in Schenley Park. The dirigible, I don't know if you can tell, but there's a guy suspended on a bicycle under the dirigible. So, and notice there is an early automobile there. This is in 1908. Besides the large celebrations, people went on pleasure drives in Schenley Park. Going for pleasure drives on Sunday afternoons was a favorite pastime, first in carriages and then in the horseless carriages when they came along. And this excerpt says, a solid bed of broken stone cemented together has been laid, and when the top layer of asphalt has been put on it, will make one of the finest drives in the city. This driveway extends from end to end of the park and winds around along the edge of the ravines so as to take in most of the points of interest. And that is 1890. It's interesting how early they were asphalting roads. Transition from carriages to cars. Cars weren't around when Schenley Park opened in 1889. The first experimental car was driven on Pittsburgh streets in 1896. More cars began to appear on streets in the late 1890s, but they were rare. Cars became more common around 1910, and although carriages seem more romantic, if you didn't have to deal with horses and feeding them and cleaning up after them, wouldn't you prefer a horseless carriage? Anyway, here is the before and after at this same location. There's the spring with the gentleman and his horse, and there's people out for their Sunday drive at the fountain. Other patriotic events took place in Schenley Park and Squirrel Hill. This is the World War I Medical Hygiene Society Monument, also known as the Hygiea Monument, and it's installed on the corner near Phipps Conservatory's water lily ponds. That was in 1922, and a large crowd attended. The monument has a bronze statue of Hygiea, goddess of health and sanitation, carved by Giuseppe Moretti in 1922, and he also carved the panthers on the Panther Hollow Bridge. The monument commemorates the members of the Allegheny County Medical Society who served in World War I. Dedication ceremony included the unveiling of the statue, an explanation of its meaning by Moretti, music, and speeches. The World War I Memorial and Grove. Has anybody been there? Well, it's a little bit up from the Westinghouse Memorial Fountain on that's West Circuit Road. The grove of trees behind the memorial was planted in 1920. The bronze plaque, in memory of the soldiers who fought in the war, was installed on the memorial in November 1930. Several hundred people took part in the ceremony. And there's a news article from the Post-Gazette that shows the dedication of the plaque that was installed on the monument. That's what it looks like today. The trees in the grove have small stone markers with bronze plaques honoring individual soldiers. And the grove is in bad need of restoration. Here's one of the they're just very small plaques, but they're at the base of these trees. It's very poignant. So the ceremony included an invocation, speakers, the laying of flowers, a gun salute, and taps. Flag monument. It's on Flagstaff Hill now. It's been moved several times. It now sits near the bottom of the steps across from Phipps Conservatory. It was installed on Flag Day, that's June 14, 1927, with a ceremony attended by the school children of Allegheny County who donated 188,163 pennies to finance the monument, and their names were put on an honor roll and placed in the base of the monument. Flag Day in 1927 was celebrated countrywide. It was the 150th anniversary of the flag. The unveiling was one of many events that commemorated the occasion in Pittsburgh. An article in the Post-Gazette about the ceremony said a vast throng of youthful donors took part in the dedication. The ceremony consisted of an invocation and music by the Schenley High School band, but because of the children, speeches were banned. Right in the heart of the Forbes Avenue Business District is American Legion Post 577. American Legion Post 577 was founded in Squirrel Hill in 1938. It met in a building, that's a picture of it, at 5857 Forbes Avenue until 1966, when this building was demolished. It now meets on the upper floor of the building that held Orr's Jewelers. The Post is still active and holds patriotic, social, and service events throughout the year, including placing flags on veterans' graves just prior to Memorial Day, and a Memorial Day service at the American Legion Memorial Gardens at the Forbes Dallas Beechwood intersection. Are you familiar with that small park? Right where that awful intersection is, Forbes Dallas Beechwood, there's this little garden that is the Memorial Gardens created by Post 577. The monument, wait, I just want to go back to this. Oh, it's not going to work. Let's see. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry. One more. I hope my battery's not going dead. But anyway, it's jumping. Maybe my battery's not doing good things.
You want the manual?
Yeah, it's acting up. So, it's the next slide, please. Next one. One back. Oh, shoot. One more back, because I want to show something. Back. This monument, sorry, it's Murphy's Law. So you see the flagpole in the middle, right above the steps. That is the monument, the little monument that was moved to Forbes Dallas Beechwood. So it was moved down there in the year 2000. So American Legion Post 577 is open to veterans, active service members, and social members. And the entrance now is, if you go where the walkway is into the parking lot, at the very end is the doorway that goes into the American Legion in the Orrs building. It might be working, I tried turning it off, so we'll see. 4th of July celebrations in the mid-1900s. Again, there was, went through more social, cultural, political, and religious changes. This folk festival at Flagstaff Hill, this happened in 1945, the last year of World War II, and it included performances by various ethnic groups, Irish jig, minuet, square dance, Slovak sokol, Ukrainian children's dance, and dances by other ethnic groups, including a German folk dance. On the other side is a patriotic ad on the right from 1950 during the Cold War. It stresses the need to vote and to be a good citizen. Advance, please. Oh, okay, it did. The 4th becomes a family-friendly holiday in the mid-1900s. So there's a 4th of July music program at Flagstaff Hill. And on the other hand, at Alderdice Field, there's a track meet and all-star Little League baseball. Sometimes anti-Semitism reared its ugly head. This headline from the July 1st, 1943 issue of the Squirrel Hill News shows how important that issue was to the Squirrel Hill neighborhood. Pro-discovery of insulting language on New Ration book. So I'm not going to read the rest of it, but, and also an unpatriotic incident, same year. This article reports that some people were upset because the national anthem wasn't played at the Alderdice graduation. But the officials at Alderdice said, well, the whole program had patriotic songs, just not the national anthem. The whole program was of a patriotic nature and theme. And this article mentions the Silver Shirts. The Silver Legion of America, commonly known as the Silver Shirts, was an American fascist and pro-Nazi organization founded by William Dudley Pelley and headquartered in Asheville, North Carolina. And this part I have circled, Silver Shirts make an issue. Some groups align with the Gerald K. Smith crowd who resent the fact that the high school pupils were not forced to attend their rally at the North Side, at which the name of President Roosevelt was booed and pro-Hitlerites were cheered, took advantage of the long program, that's the Alderdice graduation, and condemned the school administration for a lack of patriotism. So see how things can get twisted around. There's always the commercial side. Backyard holiday fun, and we can buy stuff at Sarah Gatt's House of Gifts. Beauty is patriotic. Go to when Johnny comes marching home, be sure to look your best. And of course, there's always car celebrations. Look at the prices. And that's 1980. Wow. Whoops, there we go. And of course, there's Kennywood Park. Who could say anything about the 4th without Kennywood? It's been a favorite place to go for picnics and celebrations ever since it opened in 1898. Fireworks are a major draw on the 4th of July, and other community events are held there as well. I rode that thing once. Anybody else ride it? Yeah, that was it for me. So anyway, the Green Blacks headline refers to Pony League baseball at Crick Park. Finally, this was in the 1940 Squirrel Hill News, and I do want to read it to you. In closing, these words appeared in the Squirrel Hill News as World War II was looming. Liberty is the bloodstream of America. It is what makes this country young, virile, progressive. It builds in people initiative, ingenuity, resourcefulness. It is the strength of a nation at peace. Yet liberty is fragile as a flower. It needs constant cultivation, pampered care, and the constant pruning off of those few malcontents who consistently take liberties without taking liberty to their hearts. So hard to get, so easy to lose. Retaining liberty is worth the effort of all of us. Let's make this 4th a real holiday. Thank you. Any questions? Are we going to have, okay, is that Ann?
Yeah, I'm loud. Oh, but then, yeah. So, the question is, was there a follow-up story about the flag that was thrown out of the balloon and set on fire? Like, how did that work?
You know what, I'll look in that, and but these things were not uncommon to have these set pieces, they call them. I would check on that, and I'll put it in the Squirrel Hill newsletter, our newsletter. Thank you. You know, I have to say, as you do too, Ann, that when you find a story, there's always more. Always more. Anybody else? Peter? Oh, no, it's not Peter, sorry. Sorry, John.
My question is there any idea who was the manufacturer for the fireworks back then? You know, everybody knows that Sam Valley is a big fireworks manufacturer. Was it more local to anybody, yourself, or in the audience, have any idea?
The one that was listed was Pain, P-A-I-N, but I didn't look into that. I don't know. I would assume there were more than just one. I can check on it, but that would be a very hard search. I'll see what I can do.
Okay, thanks, Al.
Helen, did you find anything about how the Old Glory exhibit worked out? Were they lowered it from a balloon?
Wait, what was the first thing?
The Old Glory fireworks, where they took it up on a balloon and let it come down on a parachute. Did that work out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that wasn't the only one. There were a number of reports about, this was just what was done, and ballooning. We did have a talk about early aviation in Pittsburgh, and they did talk about the things they did with balloons, dirigibles, parachutes. So they used human ingenuity never fails to amaze me.
What were the years that there was a riding stable, Schenley Oval? And did they participate at all in any of the 4th of July celebrations?
Well, in the early years, there were racing. It was always harness racing, but a lot of the early 4th of July celebrations did have horse racing as part of the activities. The stables, after the racing died down somewhere in the 20s, after the grandstand burned down, they did continue racing, but it wasn't constant. And the riding stables, though, they did last until about 1977, and that was not for racing. We rode horses, you go and rent a horse and go out riding in Schenley Park. 1977, the stables burned down. So. Well, thank you.
And thank you again, Helen. I hope you're all as proud as we are to have someone like Helen doing all the research that she does and pulling out all the history that she does on Squirrel Hill. Thank you again. Before we adjourn, I'd like to remind everyone about next month's program. Tuesday, July 14th, our speaker will be Eric Lidgy, Director of the Raw Jewish History Program and Archives at the Heinz History Center. Eric will discuss the histories of Congregation Road of Shalom and Temple Sinai, two of Pittsburgh's most prominent Reformed Jewish congregations, which are currently in the process of unifying to form a new congregation called Beit Kulanu, which means a house for all of us in Hebrew. So that'll be the second Tuesday.
What is the date?
It'll be the second Tuesday of July, July 14th. Okay, all members and non-members on our list will all get notices of that. And I'd like to remind you again that the night before will be the special field trip we'll have to Rivers of Steel for it's really the concluding event of that art show that our member Carolyn Boyce curated, the special collection of Henry Kerner's works. And it really is a marvelous show. And it's going to be a private showing just for our members and their guests who they bring. We're going to limit that to 50 individuals, and I'll remind you that if you're interested, you might want to pick up a flyer from the table there tonight, or even pay tonight if you can, because I think when we do the mail-on electronic registration, that will fill up fast. So thank you again for coming.